All right, today's lesson is on finding the volume of a cylinder. Before we find the volume, let's review a couple circle vocabulary words. So radius is going to be half of the distance across a circle, or the distance from the center to the outside. If you would like to highlight that orange in your notes to match the image, that'd be great. Diameter is the distance all the way across a circle. It has to pass through the center. If you want to highlight that black like it is in the image on your notes, that'd be great. Remember, pi is the constant of proportionality. It is 3.14 ... because it is irrational and goes on forever. It is proportional between circumference and diameter. So pi will always be circumference divided by diameter. And then the last one, we have circumference, which is the distance around a circle, the perimeter. Area is also the space inside of the circle. And remember, we find that using 3.14 times r, or pi r squared. It has pi r squared written here. If I were you, I would add the formula 3.14 times r, since that's how we've been seeing it in our worksheets. So the new term today is volume. Volume is the space of a 3D object. So the area of the base, which we know how to find the area, and then multiplied by the height. So we're going to use the formula we already have, 3.14 times r, and then the only thing we have to do is multiply that by the height. All right, let's practice. In this first cylinder, the radius is 7 and the height is 11. All we have to do is plug that in. Again, the formula is 3.14 times r times h. So if we're plugging in 7 for the radius, we have 3.14 times 7, and we plug in 11 for the height. Go ahead and type that into a calculator. And you should have gotten 1,692.46, and that's meters cubed. Notice we have a 3 exponent for volume. That's because it's three-dimensional. So when we did area, it was the units squared. Circumference was just 1 unit. Volume is units cubed. All right, let's try the volume for this second example. So I see our radius is 4 and our height is 10. So we're going to plug it into our formula. We got 3.14 times 4 times 4 times 10. And if you plug that into a calculator, you should get 502.4 meters cubed. All right, pause the video and see if you can calculate the volume for the 2 cylinders at the bottom. All right, plugging it in, you should have gotten 3.14 times 4 times 4 times 6, which is 301.44 centimeters cubed. And then on this one, we had 3.14 times 3 times 3 times 2, which is 56.52 centimeters cubed. All right, so when we're talking about volume, it's important to remember that finding the volume of cylinders is actually super similar to finding the volume of prisms. So if you remember from earlier grades, the volume of prisms was length times width times height. And that's because length times width was the area of the base. So we are still finding the area of the base times the height. Now we're just using our area, formula for area of a circle, which we know is pi r squared. So I would highlight this formula in your notes. This is super important to have. Pi r squared times height. And again, if you want to write that as 3.14 times r times h, that is how you will always see it in 7th grade. All right, so here are 2 more examples in case you're stuck. Notice in this first one, it gives us the diameter instead of the radius. So if the diameter is 10, we know the radius is 5. because the radius is always half of the diameter, or diameter divided by 2. So then when we plug it in, we get 3.14 times 5, which is 25, times 6, which is 471. All right, the next example, yes, the cylinder's on its side, but we are still using the same formula. So we got 3.14, R times R, 4 times 4 is 16, times 12, which should be about 602.9. All right, let's check out this reflect question. If you want a formula for the volume of a cylinder that uses the diameter instead of the radius, how can you rewrite it? Well, so far we've learned it as 3.14 R times height. And if we have the diameter, we know radius is just diameter divided by 2. So we would still have pi, and then we would have diameter over 2, diameter over 2, times h. That looks super complicated, which is why it's way easier to just figure out the radius first and then plug it in. All right, and we're gonna end with a word problem today. A little context on your word problem. A Japanese odeku is a very large drum that is made by hollowing out a section of a tree trunk. So it's a drum made out of a tree. A museum in Takayama City has 3 odekus of similar size carved from a similar tree trunk. So this odeku has a diameter of 2.8 meters and is about 2.7 meters deep. That would be our height. The smallest has a radius of 0.5 meters and a height of 0.9. We are going to find the volume of both of these drums. So with this first problem, it did give us the diameter. So the very first thing we're going to do is figure out what the radius is. So step 1, find the radius of the drum. All we do is take the diameter divided by 2. So 2.8 divided by 2 is 1.4 meters. Now I have a number to plug into my formula. So remember, our formula is 3.14 times R times H. So if we plug in our numbers, we got times 1.4 times 1.4, and our height was 2.7. If you type that into a calculator, you should get about 16.6. And that would be in meters cubed. All right, the dimensions of the smallest drum, they already gave us the radius, so we just have to plug the numbers it gave us into the formula. So we do 3.14 times 0.5 times 0.5 times 0.9. And notice I'm multiplying pi by 3 numbers less than 1. When we multiply by something less than 1, the product is actually getting smaller. So I know my answer is going to be smaller than pi, which seems weird, but it's right. So hopefully you type that into a calculator and you got 0.7 meters cubed. All right, so in summary today, guys, we learned volume, and we learned that volume is really just the area of the base times the height. So we use our area formula, 3.14 times R, and we just multiply by H. That will get us the volume of a cylinder.